What's up, humans? And welcome to a very special Saturday, Psicoactivo. Happy Saturday, everybody. I got one of the when I think about the people who are the most knowledgeable in the UFO topic, I think about a handful of people. And I'm very lucky to have Mr. Richard Dolan, UFO historian, with me on the show. Welcome, Mr. Dolan. How are you, sir?
Pavel, it is a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Very
Um,
glad to be here.
I'm very happy that you're here. I already spoke to Mr. Danny Sheehan too, but you're the second biggest personality in the UFO world that I talked to, so I'm very, very happy about it. Thank you for taking the invitation. So first of all, I guess that we could start talking about what's happening right now because I've seen your videos recently about the drone UFO flap that is happening, and I wanted to get your input about it because there are a lot of conspiracy theories and a lot of false information that is going around. Uh, People are scared, people are uneasy, especially in the East Coast. So, what is your take on what's happening right now?
It's very strange. I find it very strange as well. I just did recorded a video on this yesterday as we're speaking here. And that was basically just a recap and a little bit of an analysis. After I did that, I was chatting with my wife about it. And the more I think about certain aspects of this, the more it just everything seems wrong to me. I mean, for example, I really have to wonder why we keep hearing, why have they not been shot down? Why have we not taken any of these so-called drones down? And you hear different reasons. One, that the military technically is not supposed to be acting as domestic law enforcement within the United States, and therefore shooting these objects down, in theory, is not in their purview, or at least this was one kind of an argument. Another is that just civilian safety, they don't want to shoot these down and endanger civilians. All right. But we're talking about a phenomenon that is being seen over many areas, including military installations, including sites that have nuclear connections, certainly over in the UK, for example. Some of these drones, or so-called drones, whatever they are, we're seen in areas where there are nuclear weapons, engaging in surveillance, clearly, of different types of fighter aircraft and other systems. And, there's something called electronic countermeasures, ECM, that exists in terms of jamming the electronics of enemy systems, like drones, like missiles. Just last week in the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukrainians launched 6 more ATACMS intermediate range missiles into Russian territory. The Russians stated that they disabled all 6. 2 they shot down, and 4 they said they disabled with ECM, electronic countermeasures. Now, those are ATACMS missiles. Those are, I have to assume, have much better electronic anti-jamming capabilities than a typical drone. And so it really makes you wonder, where is the United States in their electronic countermeasures? Are they that incapable, that embarrassingly bad in the fact that they are unable to take a single one of these objects down, presumably when it's directly over their own military bases or some other sensitive areas? They have not been able to do that in a single case. I find that very strange. It doesn't sound
Hmm.
credible. I'm not saying that America's electronic countermeasures are superior to the Russians. I don't think that they are, in fact, but they're not junior high school level either. You would
Yeah.
think that they would be able to handle these, and yet none of them have been taken out. So that's one real problem. The fact that the U.S. federal government seems helpless. I mean, pathetically helpless, if we could put it that way. I mean, this should be an embarrassment to them, right? You would think.
It is. I think it
And
is.
yeah, so I'm thinking they can't or they won't. They can't jam them or they won't jam them. And I don't know which one it is. If they won't do it, then, which is what I'm going to go with at the moment. Um, if they won't do it, is it because this is an op that they're doing? And if it's an op that they're doing, is it an op that they want the attention on or don't want the attention on? Was it a mistake that they did the op and that they were not intending for it to get all this attention, testing some new drone technology, let's just say. And now, but if that's the case, you would think, well, they would shut it down by now. Someone would say, okay, we're getting too much attention. Let's put this on ice for a little while until we figure things out. But they're not doing that. The drones are continuing. And so that makes me think, is this an op that they want to do, that they want it to get attention? And if they wanted to have attention, why would they want to have so much embarrassing attention on them? Unless they were trying to play up, are they trying to play up a threat? Are they trying to frighten people? Is that what this is? Is this some kind of game? And is it a game that they want people to be afraid due to aliens or due to the Russians or Chinese?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things at play here, and I don't know the answer, but it seems mighty strange
What
and
do you think
wrong.
about the drones possibly sniffing nuclear material? That's one of the things that have been floating around the internet. Do you think that's plausible too?
Well, we've been made to understand that some of these drones um, have been over areas where there are nuclear weapons. So when you say sniffing around, they're obviously, I would assume that they're there to examine, investigate, and that the nuclear connection is important. But how far it goes, I don't really know. I mean, one of these drones apparently was seen over one of Donald Trump's properties.
Yeah, that was
Another one
weird.
was over an Army missile arsenal, I believe, and in New Jersey. And then they're just seen, I guess, over just residential areas as well. I don't think they're all exclusively being seen. And are these drones? Uh, it's hard to, I haven't really done like a study of all the videos and photographs. I know that there are military guys out there that are doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that some of them are definitely being identified as standard aircraft and as helicopters, others not. So, when you have a case like in the state of New Jersey, I believe now that these objects have been seen in every one of the 21 counties of that state. So it's all over New Jersey. It's into New York State, into Pennsylvania. I'm hearing stories about it being across the nation, but I'm not really getting specifics. I don't really know what specific states, what areas exactly. Is the UK situation still happening? I don't know. So there's a lot to keep track of here. There's a lot there, and there's a lot of information, but there's a lot of smoke, and things are not. There's the fog of war, as we might say here.
Funny enough, the ones that are the most quiet, as usual, the CIA and the Air Force, are not saying anything about this.
No, right.
And those are the ones that I tend to point towards when any of this happens, and the Department of Energy too. Um, because I'm gonna read you something, see if you can identify who's from. Um, it goes like this. What is happening is not at all what we thought would happen. Once there was recognition of the problem, we thought there would be an opening to the scientific community and the public. That's not what's happening. I just came from a meeting with a number of scientists who are involved and have very highly secured clearances on subjects that the public is not told about. And what the public seeing about UFOs on television and newspapers and on the internet is entirely driven by military concerns. The rushing into interpretations at various levels, including Congress, on false data, it's partial data behind multiple shields of secrecy. This is not disclosure. My wife and I have spent 2 months recently in Europe where things are happening now because they are beginning to realize that the US has been lying. We know it's all politics. The group in Washington within the DoD that has been charged with looking into the problem, the Arrow, it turns out has signed a $2 million contract with a company that is concerned with rumor control, essentially to stop people from stirring up the public with stories about UFOs, what UFOs may be. Who do you think this is from?
Well, it's obviously someone connected to the UFO community. It sounds like it to me.
It's Valet.
Oh, of course. Of
Yeah.
course. I was thinking who was in Europe. It's obviously, yeah, it makes sense, Valet. At first, I was wondering if it was Elizondo, but no, Jacques Vallée makes sense. Uh, yeah, I think that's a very on point statement. Um, I don't really have anything that I would disagree with in what he said there, except for the fact that you would think this would lead to disclosure. I don't know if I would think. And also the fact that he said starting to think that the US government is lying. I think he said something like that, like starting. You're starting to think that.
This is an
Um,
old quote, relatively like 2, 3 years old, but
oh, Valet. Oh,
he's known all along, really, what's been happening. Um, what do you think about
Valet's.
that?
Yeah.
What's your take on the whole UFO disclosure movement? Because it is driven, as I see it, from one or two main sources, which is possibly Hal Puthoff and Dr. Eric Davis. Um, all of this movement. And these guys are tied to the intelligence community. These guys potentially or possibly have running contracts with defense contractors. And Elizondo is a counter intel person. Um, you you would understand why people might be uh, weirded out by this and not trusting Lou. I mean, the whole time I've seen Lou express himself, he strikes me as a decent man, but he's still counter intel. I mean, it's really hard to trust these people because that's their job. So, what do you think about this whole movement? Do you have you ever really trusted it? Do you think they're doing it for the greater good? Uh, what is your assessment on that?
Well, in politics, whether it's today or 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, you don't always pick your allies or your bedfellows. They say politics makes strange bedfellows. It's true. If I were to go through my whole life waiting for other people to be as pure-minded as I like to think I am, or other activists in the UFO community, we would be waiting a long time for such individuals to come forward, especially if we wanted them to have any influence from within the United States government. That is not a breeding ground for pure-minded spirits, people who believe in, you know, the true public good. Maybe some of them do, but they're also experienced in the real world where those types of ideals are just that, they're ideals, and you're in a world of power politics. That's the reality of the world. Within the government and the national security community specifically, I would say that, um, you know, I mean, I love studying history going, way, way back. And the thing is, when you look at any historical period, you are going to find marriages of convenience within the political sphere, among people who actually don't get along or don't see things the same way. I don't really think it's any different with the UFO community. So you mentioned Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis. I've known Hal Puthoff personally for close to 25 years. Since my very first book came out, I've communicated. I'm not close. I wouldn't say that I'm close friends with him, but I know him and I respect him. I like him. And I do know that he is someone with very high level clearances. Possibly either he or Kit Green might have the record for all among all living people to have the longest top secret SCI clearances around. I think it's more than 50 years. So he knows a lot. I also happen to believe that when he has spoken to me privately about his desire for more openness on this matter, that he was telling me the truth. I think he believes it. So there are folks who have connections to that world who, for whatever their reasons, some of them are personal reasons, some of them might be professional reasons. Some of them might mix those reasons, but some of them, I think, do want a more openness on UFOs. Do they want total disclosure, complete, 100%? I don't know. I don't know if they would go that far, but they have an alignment of interests that coincides with that of some of us in the general public, including myself. And so my attitude has always been, I could easily go down the road of trying to psychoanalyze all of the motivations for these people and say, well, I think he's doing this because he wants to get patentable information, patentable data, so he can make money on new technology and get in on the game, like a lot of these other defense contractors do. Like that's a definite motivation you could easily see for some of these people. They
Yeah.
know the phenomenon's real. They know the technology is real. They know there's money there, and they want a part of it. And they can't get in without changing the public conversation to some extent. Maybe that's what it is, part of it. Some of them might think that there is a genuine defense concern with these objects, and they need to make that more of a public thing because it's not all, you know, Pleiadians from the next dimension that want to bring us into the galactic community. Maybe there's some trouble out there, and maybe they want to raise that conversation. I think that there are some of them who think this. I think there's probably different motivations. But if I go down the road of trying to think that I can figure out their motivations, I think that's not as helpful as if I were simply to judge what they say based on whether it's true or not. So someone like Elizondo has said, just to use him as an example, in my view, he has said many things about this phenomenon that are true. Now, he recently had that whole thing with the Romanian photograph that was definitely not true. But I'm going to
Yeah.
look at that as a mistake. I really think that he just screwed up. I think it's as simple as that. I don't think he was trying to lie. But overall, he said most of the things that he has stated. I look at them and I think that sounds true. He's saying important things that are true, and he's saying them on, in many cases, national television. I'll never forget 5 years ago, he told Tucker Carlson that the U.S. government has possession of these craft. That's a huge thing to say.
Yeah.
So I support that. Does he have an ulterior motive? Well, what would the ulterior motive be? I hear people saying to scare the public. How much has Elizondo really scared the public? He's certainly not scaring them about aliens. The main U.S. government message about all of this is that it's not aliens. It's not extraterrestrial. So if this is an op of some sort, I don't see that as a very effective one. It's not like you have a program to scare the public and make them go running to the government in fear of aliens. They're not doing that. They keep saying overall, no sign of extraterrestrials. So it's been since 2017. We're now going into 7 years, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. 7 full years.
Yeah.
So I don't really see that as being the op. So ulterior motives, I am convinced that there are ulterior motives, and some of them have to do with money. But in terms of Elizondo being a counterintelligence officer, what I expect from a guy like that is he's going to see potential threats everywhere. That's what we pay guys like that for. That's his job. Literally, his job is to look for threats to United States national security. So if he's not thinking along those lines, you have to think he's not very good at his job. Of course, he's going to do that. So when people say, "Well, you're bringing up a threat narrative and so forth," well, what else are you going to expect? To a hammer, every solution is going to look like a nail, right? Isn't that the expression?
Yeah.
With these guys. So that's my take. I think I try to study what these guys are saying on the basis of whether or not it seems true, or whether I can check it out to be true or not. And if there's a record of them saying things that are not true, then I stop to believe them. If they have a record of saying things that are mostly true, then I look at where have they been wrong, and is there a pattern with what they've been wrong about. But with Elizondo, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing anything other than what I believe is an honest guy.
It's
I've
interesting
met
that you
Lou.
mention
Yeah.
sorry, it's interesting that you mentioned that he's like mentally equipped to look at for threats. It reminds me also of Jim Semivan, who also had experiences, and the phenomenon presented itself, according to him, as something negative, something that even traumatize his family. So I wanted to ask you about this like dualism that exists between people who have experiences that are negative but have like a more militaristic preparation, you could say, or from the intelligence community. And for example, the case of Chris Bledsoe, who uh, says that in his book that the phenomenon is something not necessarily negative. Um, what do you think is going on there? Do you think that upbringing has something to do? Do you think religion has something to do with it? Why is there such difference between how this phenomenon presents itself, or do you think it's different phenomena?
Yeah, I tend to think it's the latter that is different. That's my, I mean, I can't really know. But I have a pet theory, which is that our species right now is of prime interest to any other intelligence or intelligences that is able to observe us, because we're going through a particularly interesting moment right now. And I tend to think we're bringing in the local neighborhood, as it were. Whether they are from another dimension of reality or just another planet, I can't really say that I know for sure. But I think that we're looking at multiple groups. I've heard, and like you know, I've spoken with Chris Bledsoe as well, at some in some detail, and many other people who have explained to me how their experiences were very positive and beautiful and uplifting. And who am I to say that that didn't happen to them? That that's not true. I'm in no position to doubt that. I can definitely say to you that I've spoken with equally compelling individuals who have said that they know that at least some of them are not, that some of them are nasty and not pleasant. And this is a theme that has also percolated at very quiet levels for a long time. Isn't it possible that we have different groups? So in Chris's case, I'm going to assume that his experiences have solely been with one type of being, let's just say, if that is so, that he maybe rightly says is positive. So it would be easy to say, like, if that's all of your experiences, you're thinking, of course they're wonderful. But I think it's from where I'm standing, it looks like we're in a bigger community than that, a larger neighborhood than just one type of being. And my attitude is, I was just asked this recently by someone, what do I think they are? And they were wondering, like, angels or demons or whatever. And I think I just said, I think they're life forms, whatever that means. They're a life form. So they live, they exist. And at least sometimes they exist in physical form, like you and me, which means that they need food. Uh, Maybe they need to excrete, they need to rest, or they need to they have to do things to stay alive. They have to reproduce, all of those things. And they have their own volition, which means they have their own interests, their own desires. That's a life form. And like any life form that we know of on Earth, they are going to look out for their own interests first and foremost. And so what I tend to think is that these other beings, that's what they're doing. They're not here. I don't think they're here for us per se. I think they're interested in us, but I have to assume as life forms, that's what they are, then they're here for themselves and they're here for their own interests and needs, which may or may not coincide with our own at different times. So it's like a game of politics. Is there area for diplomacy and compromise? Is everything win-win, or are certain things win-lose? This type of thing. Um, I tend to think that it's every bit as complex as our own international geopolitics happens to be on our own planet. I ask myself, why should it be radically different when you go beyond Earth, when you're dealing with life forms? So I'm looking for a complex situation. The problem is I often liken it to going to a sporting match, baseball game or a soccer game, but I don't have the scorecard. I don't know who the players are. And that's sometimes how I feel with this phenomenon.
Yeah. Based on what you just told me, though, because with everything that's happening right now, there's a lot of people that are starting to look online for these topics. And when I first started looking into it, I got a little overwhelmed because it was just a lot of information, a lot of theories that sounded really terrifying to me. Um, and who better than you to give us some advice? What would you recommend someone that is just getting into the topic and wants to know what's going on in the most objective manner possible?
Wow. When I was in that position a little over 30 years ago in the early 1990s, that was a different world. What I did is I just read a lot of books. I just read a lot of, especially a lot of the older historical books, like from the 1950s and 60s. I had to hunt down used book dealers. I made friends with one in particular. He was great. Libraries, remember those days? I used to go to libraries and
Oh
get
yeah.
interlibrary loan. I did all of that. I just read and I took notes. And today it's almost a lot more confusing because there are so many more voices out there now. And some of these voices are good, and some of these voices are definitely not good. There's a lot of people out there. They're great. They're good. They're better at marketing than I am,
Yeah.
that's for sure. And they can get a big audience, but they have a lot of sketchy things that they're saying. I'm not going to get into any names. I don't want to start any fights
No, no,
here,
no, no, no. I don't want that
but
either.
there's a lot of that out there. Look, I would just say for anyone starting out wondering how to move ahead on this topic, how to think about this topic. The first thing you have to learn to do is you have to learn to trust your own judgment. But when you're watching anyone out there or reading, the first thing you want to do is be able to ask yourself, is it possible for me to check their work? So I guess part of my, if I could call it my philosophy, is um, I'm not better than anyone else who watches my videos. I'm not better than you. I'm not better than anyone listening. I'm just another guy interested in this. And so my attitude is, if I'm doing research, I want people to be able to see what is the nature of the research I've done. I want them to know that in theory they could have done exactly what I did. I just went through the trouble to do it, and I'm showing them I looked at this source and this source and this source. I try to do that in my books particularly and make it easy for people to see. Um, where did he get it from? Many years ago, uh, this is 15 plus years ago on Facebook, back in those days when I used to look at Facebook. Someone had a photographic image of what looked like a giant with one eye, like a cyclops. And he was putting it out to this large Facebook group. And I saw that photograph. It came to me, and I did a 10-minute, a 5-minute Google reverse image search. And I wrote back, I said, that's not a real thing. That guy won an Adobe Photoshop competition in 2005. And he wasn't even trying to hoax us. He just made this for a competition, and you're using this. And so the guy was disappointed, and he said, well, I'll take your word for it, Mr. Dolan, because I respect you. And I said, no, don't take my word for it.
Check
That's
it
not the point
yourself.
here. Do it yourself. And this is what I tell anyone. It's like, I don't know, like someone would say, why should I trust you? And I always say, I'm not asking you to trust me. Trust yourself, do your own work. This is not an easy subject, as you were discovering when you first jumped in. The learning curve can be steep, and that is just the price you have to pay
Yeah.
for jumping into possibly the most fascinating, mysterious, profound topic that you could. People have no idea how incredible this subject is until they do a deep dive. So it's worth it, but you got to do the work. You have to be willing to be confused. You have to be willing to be wrong. You have to be willing to go back and forth on certain things too, and to be able to change your mind. And for all of that, you have to learn to rely on yourself and your own judgment. That's difficult to do. So in lieu of that, find people that at least provisionally you think you can trust, but don't do that in the long run, because ultimately it's got to come down to your own judgment and your own work. And to people who don't just say, trust me, I've got this inside source, that type of thing. The UFO community went through a lot of that in the past with self-proclaimed pundits and gurus who would say, I have this insider, I have this whistleblower, I have this person, and they would come up with the craziest stories imaginable, and that's very unhelpful. So we need to be able to fact check ourselves, and that's difficult too, because we all want answers immediately. And I'm usually pretty satisfied with not. I don't have to have an answer immediately. I've been dealing with this mystery for over 30 years, and there's still a lot of things I don't know. You have to be comfortable with some level of uncertainty and not to feel that you have to jump to conclusions every day. It's
Yeah.
not the best answer. I don't know what else I could
No,
say.
it's actually an answer that I commune with, and I think you're spot on. So thank you. I wanted to ask you, there was a recent interview of Eric Davis with Jesse Michaels on American Alchemy. Did you get to see that one?
No, I heard about it. I want to see that because I like Jesse a lot, and I'm a great admirer of Eric Davis. So that's on my list.
Okay, we can talk about it later at a future conversation. I hope we can get another chance to though.
I'm sure it's
Uh,
good. I know that Davis, and I was very gratified about this, um, authenticated the Davis Wilson notes
he did.
from his
Yeah,
conversation with Thomas Wilson. I was just personally gratified about that.
yeah, he did. That was a big one. Another one was that he insinuated that he and Hal Puthoff were the reason David Grush got to the 40 witnesses he interviewed.
Yeah, I totally
That was
believe
a
that.
that was a big one too.
I have no doubt that that is true.
Yeah. And what is your overall take on Dr. Davis? Why do you think people like him and Jim Lakatsky and Colm Kelleher are refusing to come clean or maybe testify under oath? Do you think it's because of the lack of protection they would get, or do you think there's another potential reason?
I can't really speculate too deeply on their motives for this. I just don't feel that I'm in a position to do that for several reasons. I just don't think that I'm good to do that. But I will just say more generally, um, I don't know Davis personally the way that I know Hal Puthoff. But I'm very familiar with that community. Sometimes I call them the Bigelow crowd. I
Yeah.
mean, they really got their coherence during the days of the National Institute for Discovery Science under Robert Bigelow. Davis worked for Bigelow. Puthoff has had a long connection with Bigelow. Colm Kelleher, Jim Lakatsky, Jacques Vallée, who you mentioned earlier, John Alexander, Dr. Kit Green. All of these people have close associate. The late astronaut Edgar Mitchell, very important person with all of that as well. They're part of a group, that has always wanted to get to the center of the maze. They all know a lot, but I don't think any of them know everything. I don't think so. I don't even think, maybe not even Puthoff and Davis, but I think they know a lot. So in Davis's case, a lot of them, I think they feel that they can't or won't testify because they still have their own clearances that they want to maintain. I think a lot of it is that simple. It's not a good look for them to go out and make these statements. And I think for that reason, this is why Davis for a long time did not authenticate the notes that he had with Wilson. Those are not even classified notes per se. They were private notes, but they dealt with a highly classified program. And I think it's obvious that Davis felt, and Wilson for that matter also must have felt it was not appropriate for them to talk about it. They had people in their industry who were looking at them, like asking, how reliable is this guy? And they have that whole reputation to maintain for their community there. On the other hand, you could see with Davis, even long before he made the statement to authenticate those notes, he knows exactly what is the line that he does not go past, and he will walk right up to that line and just barely, almost not completely walk over it, but not quite walk over it. He's mastered that art. Uh, 5 years ago, he did an interview where he basically authenticated the notes back then without authenticating them. He knows exactly. And Puthoff is very similar, in my opinion. So I think that they are two of the leaders of this faction that is pushing for some transparency and openness on this subject. Now, the real question as to why is a really good one. Is it as simple? I'm just speculating here in the case of someone like Puthoff. Is it as simple as a matter of a legacy, that they believe in it, that they believe it's the right thing to do? Is that so impossible for some of these people? I don't think it is impossible. I'm just guessing. That they think, yeah, this is a good thing the world needs to know. I mean, look, I can only say from having spoken privately with Al Puthoff, he knows my position, and he knows the position of many other researchers for many years in the UFO community. He's deeply conversant with that. He knows it. And he has also known that this is real for a long time. For the longest time, he wasn't able to say anything. And now it's no big deal, I think, if he does. But he's always known this is true. So, and he's always seemed very sympathetic to the research community. So I think that there's a lot of room for personal desires to have a place in this as well. And I think that is part of it. I don't know that it's all cold calculations of power politics and national security desires. I don't know that they all work like that 100%. You know, there's a human being behind some of these persona.
Okay, let's move to a different group that is not so friendly. Um, I've heard you talk about this multiple times. There's the story of the Majestic 12, and then there's Zodiac, and then we recently found out about this program, Immaculate Constellation. And then I saw you also a little while ago talking to Dr. Beatriz Villarroel about the Menzel conspiracy. Do you think those are all connected? What can you tell us about what you researched about all of this?
Yeah, I think from the way you just described them, I think they are connected for sure. In the case of Dr. Villarroel, she's a very interesting person. So she's an astronomer. I forget which school, I think in Uppsala, Sweden, if I'm not mistaken, University of Uppsala. And for people who don't know, she's made a bit of a splash in the last year or two. She has studied astronomical plates. So these are images that professional astronomers will take out of their observatories of the night sky, and they record it. And she recently found plates, I think from not Harvard. Harvard's where they were destroyed. But anyway, she found plates. Oh, I think the Hayden Planetarium. I can't remember. Anyway, showing the early 1950s night sky, and there are several a couple from 1950, from 1952, some plates from late July of 1952, coinciding with the wave of UFOs over the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Point is that there were some unknown objects that were recorded on those plates. And then she read an autobiography of one of Dr. Donald Menzel's leading assistants during the 1950s. Menzel had been the director of the Harvard Planetarium for many years, starting in 1953. And turns out that the Harvard, which had the largest collection of astronomical plates, Menzel had an enormous number of them destroyed. A huge legacy. And in fact, officially speaking, if you were to even look up this on Wikipedia, this is acknowledged and is called the Menzel Gap. So for about 15 years, Harvard ceased taking new photographs of the night sky. Menzel just ordered them to stop. And after I got to talk about this with Dr. Villarroel, I did my own research into this, and I had my own sources on Menzel, and it occurred to me that I think it looks to me that he was obsessed with destroying all of this evidence of flying saucers, UFOs. he was an astronomer, but he actually spent much more of his time debunking UFOs and doing actual astronomy for a long time. Menzel, of course, is alleged to be one of the members of MJ-12 from the original MJ-12 document. Some people say that's bogus, it's disinformation. Others say that it's completely true, and others say that it's probably true, but maybe has some disinformation put in there, which is what I think. And so, yeah, I think Menzel's position in this was very important. He was the leading academician, in my opinion, in the world whose job was to ridicule and debunk UFOs so that respectable people would not go into the field. He was very largely successful until, he died in the 1970s. He was quite successful. He was the gatekeeper within the academic community, the scientific community. He made it look absolutely ridiculous. There's always got to be people like that. You mentioned MJ-12, you mentioned Zodiac. I stumbled across Zodiac. Actually, I'm going to say myself and an anonymous colleague. People still don't know who he is, but he's a friend of mine. We were looking into this. We were studying the Davis Wilson notes and also studying another thing that leaked out at that time, 2019. Remember the alien autopsy email thread?
Yes, I remember that.
That was the other interesting thing that leaked out with after the death of Dr. Edgar Mitchell. That was an interesting thread from around the year 2000, and it included people like Dr. Kit Green, Eric Davis, Hal Puthoff, John Alexander, I think, was part of it. The Bigelow crowd, essentially. And they're arguing over, is the alien autopsy by Ray Santilli, is that legit or not? And for the record, during that thread, Dr. Kit Green said, yeah, that is real. And then Kit Green later said to me and to others, no, I was totally wrong. It's not real. It's bogus. Whatever. Whatever. At the end of that thread, Puthoff said to Green, but maybe to the group, said, hey, recently UFO Magazine had a series on this Sedge Masters, I think he said. And then he said, we, as in he, tend to think that this is accurate, and even though it's fictional, it represents reality pretty well. What do you guys think? So I read this, and a friend of mine were reading it, and we both were like, what is he talking about? What is this Sedge Masters thing in UFO Magazine? Well, I have a pretty good collection of UFO magazines, and I had all three of those issues from 1998, 99 that discuss this. And it turns out that it was actually about a program called Zodiac, fictionalized, we're told. It's good fiction. It's very good fiction. I'll say that. It's very well written. And it was written by a guy with a pseudonym. The pseudonym was Greg Halifax. Turns out that the actual author's name is Jeffrey Griffith. Jeffrey Griffith is still alive. He will not talk to anybody. He's been very surly from what I've learned. If anyone tries to reach out to him, he doesn't want to talk to anyone. Griffith's actually also mentioned at the end of the Davis Wilson notes. That whole crowd knew about Jeffrey Griffith. Who was Jeffrey Griffith? Well, he's an attorney, or was. He was clearly friends with another woman named Mary Elizabeth, the hell's her name? Mary Elizabeth Meyer, I believe. And I think the story was she worked at TRW. She went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I think, and learned certain confirmatory facts about the UFO reality and the cover-up. This is what I think happened. She told Griffith, so they knew some important things. I think she also may have had a UFO or USO sighting off the coast of California by Rancho Palos Verdes. Because in the UFO magazine, all of this stuff was written about in fictionalized form.
Okay. And
what the series of articles, which revolve around a fictional character named Sedge Masters, it's all about a UFO crash retrieval program. That's what it's all about. And it's called Zodiac. Well, Zodiac has 12 houses, just like MJ-12 has got 12 people. You could see that it could be the same type of thing. And it's an impressive series of articles. I created a PDF of all of them, and I put them on my website. I'll have a link. I'm going to put a link, give a link to you and the viewers of this video. They can just go to it and download it. Read it.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's good reading. It's good reading. Um, so I think, and then so then when you go and you ask around, I asked around in a few circles about Zodiac, and no one would say absolutely it's real, but everyone would say, I'm not saying anything, but yeah, that it's real. So that's the kind of situation it's in. So it looks to me that it's real. Now, is that the new name for MJ12? Is that a branch of MJ12? I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know.
And what about Immaculate Constellation? What are your takes on
Yeah.
that one?
Well, my jury's out on it. I think it's potentially true. It certainly reads correctly to me. That document reads like someone who's genuinely in that community is writing about what he or she, I assume he knows. Um, and I mean, it reads like it's honest. Now, some people have said to me they think it's complete disinformation. Well, it could be. Um, but somehow I think there's probably a lot of truth in there. Doesn't
All
mean that
right.
that's all 100% true. We have to keep in mind people make mistakes, people get wrong information. When Philip Corso did The Day After Roswell back in 1997, I think he was writing that legitimately, but I think he also made a ton of mistakes. He was deaf, practically blind. He was in his 80s and he was just writing things out, pencil and paper. So yeah, you're going to make mistakes. And I wouldn't be surprised if Immaculate Constellation is along that. But no, it strikes me as potentially legit. There was a leak many years ago to the late researcher Leonard Stringfield. Stringfield also, he was digging a lot into Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He lived near Wright-Pat, spoke to a lot of military witnesses to bodies and the cover-up in general. And one of his leaks said to him, there's a big computer computer base that's got all of the data on all of this. He didn't give it a name. This is in the late 70s. He said, if you find that, you've got the whole thing. And I wonder, is this an earlier version of Immaculate Constellation, which seems to be a kind of, I mean, one version of it strikes me as it's a massive database of information. I think it's entirely possible that something like that is real.
Okay. Whoa. I wanted to ask you about this connection that seems to be, to me, one of the most obscure stories in the whole topic, which is human potential. We know that the Stargate program ended in 1995. One of my main stories that I'm following is about a Mexican doctor who disappeared in 1994. He was part of Stargate. Um, but what do you think the connection is between UFOs and consciousness? Have you looked into that at all? What is your take on that?
Oh, I think that there's a very important connection there. Um, this is something that, it took me years to kind of really fully come into this understanding, but I think it's a significant connection. I mean, just think of it logically, hypothetically, theoretically. If you're an alien that has an extremely high level of what we would call intelligence or cognitive capability, you have some ability to engage in what we would call telepathy, or you have some kind of hive mind that works in some way that we don't quite get. But yeah, there is something like telepathy. I have no doubt in my mind that that's real. I'm married to a remote viewer. She's quite good at what she does. And I've known the remote viewing phenomenon and community for many years, many years. I don't need to be convinced that that's real. So I think that, if you're one of these highly, highly intelligent telepathic aliens and you're observing humanity, you would know that these humans have this capability as well. And you would also know some of them are actively working on developing that potential and a capability more than others. Would that make you more interested in them than the others? It might. I could imagine so. I'm just guessing. What I think is the case is that we humans, in the long story of our development as a species, have reached a critical capability where we now have some ability to reach into this, let's call it other dimensional type of thinking. We're not we're not completely proficient at it, maybe, but we have some capability with it. So you have individuals who are able, via remote viewing, to detect many things that our common sense tells us there should be no way you're able to figure that out, but you did it. So we have this capability. It is there. I'm going to assume that at least some species elsewhere have a greater capability at that than we do. I think we've just kind of come into this in the last, I don't know, 50, 100, 200,000 years, which is, short period by the standards of evolution. So I think they're interested in us for that reason. And I think that that development of that capability just probably is a very important part of our future development as a species.
Do you think
So
that they might see us as a potential threat due to these capabilities? Because that's something that it keeps coming in the back of my mind all the time when I see how secretive all has been around psi abilities. And I can't help but think that maybe they're doing it on purpose, like hiding it, because we might be, I don't know, we might have some kind of ability that these other groups and civilizations and whatever might find dangerous to them. I know it's pretty out there what I'm telling you, but just wanted to get your opinion on that.
I don't have any problem with anything you just said there. I think it sounds very potentially true. People would say, well, what danger could we pose to an extraterrestrial species? Well, many. We're a very aggressive life form. Of course, I think all life forms potentially are very aggressive. I think all. I think it's a universality. If you were to give birds uh, arms and fingers, the ability to manipulate their environment, they might become dangerous too.
Yeah.
They're very territorial. All life forms, plants as well, they're all territorial. They're all competing. And so that's what we are. We're aggressive. We like to expand. If you give us, remember, what is it, the mouse utopia experiment from years ago? You give these mice everything they want, and they develop gangs, and they develop basically almost warfare, and they become these horrible, completely expansive territorial creatures. That's what we've done. We do that to ourselves. And I have to think, and observing intelligence, they may very well be the same way. They may be very used to getting their own way, just like we are. But the point is, are we a danger? Are we a threat? Do we have capabilities that are being concealed? Are the psi capabilities something that must be concealed? I think yes. I think there are people who delve into these matters who I think they do believe that there are. I remember chatting a couple of years ago with my wife, with Russell Targ, one of the founders of the remote viewing program. And Russell said, with remote viewing, there are no secrets. There are no secrets. Anything, literally anything, can be detected through remote viewing. If that's true, and then you have to ask yourself, this is something I get to chat about with my wife. Is remote viewing the full end game of what we're capable of, or is that just kindergarten level stuff of a capability that we don't even know? Use a certain combination of electronics or drugs or certain kinds of training. Can you do remote viewing, what we call remote viewing, to a vastly higher level? Remote influencing, remote killing, or even other ways of perception beyond what we call remote viewing. Is that possible? I think probably. So I think, are we a danger? If there's an alien group watching us, or multiple alien groups watching us, I'll tell you what one thing they have determined. which is that we are going through this very rapid transformation right now, and we are pushing, pushing, pushing ever deeper, ever more. You know, you look over the last century or more. I've just finished a 3-volume study on USOs, water-based phenomena. And one thing that became very clear to me is if you start in the year like 1900, 1900 was the first year of having an actual submarine in the water. That's when we started. We just really started penetrating the water at that time. Sonar, echolocation, really during the First World War began. We're just taking baby steps. And we go from that to the Second World War, where we start having nuclear aircraft carriers that could project power across the oceans. And then shortly after that, nuclear-powered submarines, nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, nuclear weapons on our ships. We get down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench in 1960, where like out of nowhere, we're pushing, pushing, pushing. And then at the same time, after World War II, we start putting satellites in orbit. All of us fast. We're on a very, so like these other beings, anyone watching us would have to adapt to that, would have to adjust their own strategy, because they're realizing we're able to see them better and better. We're becoming, within the space of just a few generations, vastly more capable at dealing and observing them. So does that mean we could be a danger? Yes. People will like to say, how could we possibly compete with them? We must be like ants or insects. I don't know about that. I don't know that I believe that is true all the time. I think that progress doesn't necessarily go infinitely along a path. I think it goes to levels. I think it plateaus. I just don't think in theory that it's possible for progress to go indefinitely for, forever. I just don't believe it. It can't be. Something's got to be a limitation somewhere. And maybe they've hit a plateau. Maybe we're approaching their plateau.
You're so privileged to be able to have a wife that's a remote viewer, and you can talk about this all the time. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's good too. I mean, there are a lot of great remote viewers out there.
Yeah.
But Tracy, she doesn't really do remote viewing formally these days, but she does her things. She's able to, she perceives a lot of interesting things. I love hearing about it with her. We have a lot of good morning conversations over that type of
I got
thing.
about 3 more questions, if that's okay with you, so we
Yeah,
can wrap it up.
you bet.
The next one is about your recent book about USOs. I went recently to Ensenada, which is where my wife is right now. She studies there. She's doing a PhD, and I go there often. And I
Wait,
recently
where? I
went
didn't hear you.
Ensenada,
Okay.
which is it's close to Guadalupe Island, and
Yeah.
I decided to go speak to some of the fishermen that spoke to Elizondo in the show
Yeah,
Unidentified. I spoke
exactly.
to one of them, and they tell me that there's a lot of activity recently with all of these flaps going around all over the world. They send me some videos, and yeah, they're like orb type UFOs going in and out. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think is happening there? Because Danny Sheehan told recently, I think it was Julian Dory, that there were some bases underwater, but he didn't specify whose bases they were. I don't know how privy he is to information, but based on what you've investigated in your book, which is you investigate more into Puerto Rico, if I'm not mistaken, a lot more there. What do you think is going on? Do you think
Well,
there are bases?
yeah, I do. Well, my book, my study, which by the way is coming out in 3 volumes. The first volume, we're talking in mid-December 2024 now. I have been hoping and trying to get the first volume out before the end of the year. It'll probably be very, very early 2025. The writing for volume 1 is completely finished. All the cases for volumes 2 and 3 are also completely finished. So they're all going to follow within a couple of months between each other. So they'll all be out this year, this coming year. No, they cover the entire world, the entire world. In my opinion, Puerto Rico deserves a title as the king of USOs activities, because the density of cases around that island is unbelievable, at least in terms of the cases that have come to me that I've been able to find. It's a lot of stuff going on there. Particularly along the north coast and the east and west coast of that island, including going out into the Puerto Rico Trench, a little bit north of the island there. But the entire Gulf of Mexico is very active, in my opinion, and definitely the west coast of the U.S., off the coast of California, down in the area that Danny's talking about, where I think he was talking about near Catalina Island and south of that area. Those are very active areas, extremely, in terms of the reports that we get. There are other active areas in the world. Parts of the coast of South America near Buenos Aires, I would say. I would say also probably the South China Sea. I would also say even near the Aleutian Islands in the North Pacific. There's actually a few. The Persian Gulf has had a fair amount of activity. The entire northeastern coast of the U.S. and Canada. People don't often think of that in terms of USOs, but there's a tremendous number of reports from there. So it's spread out. Bases, all I can say is that what we have is suspicion that there's bases. When you see activity of objects exiting the water and entering the water on a regular basis, then it's reasonable to think that there might be a base down there. Another area is off the southern coast of Italy in the Mediterranean. There's a lot of active Italian USO research and UFO research out there, and they're recording a lot. Sicily, Messina, that whole area. So when you see reports of objects entering and emerging from bodies of water, and again, there's quite a few of those, I think it's natural to think that there might be a base. Where Danny Sheehan is saying, I'm not 100% sure where he's saying that base is, except off Southern California somewhere.
Okay.
And how he's getting that information. I need to talk to Danny. It's been a little while. We need to catch up anyway. And I don't know what he's going to be willing to say to me. But do I think there are bases under the water? Yes, I do. I think there are. I think it's a pretty logical place to have one, especially in an era in which humans are spreading all over the world. If you want a place that is secure, well, under the water might still be one of the better areas to do that. And as long as you have the technology to create something under the ocean floor or inside an ocean mountain, let's just say, it can work out pretty well.
Okay. I'm going to ask you one two-parter question, then the final question. It has to do with physical evidence that, because in the UFO researching community, English speaking, I see that there's a lot of lack of like physical evidence. There's a lot of documents. There's a lot of people within the intelligence community and academia, scientists who talk about this, but there seems to be little evidence. And I know that the hearings were very important in the US, but there's something happening in South America that a lot of people threw under the rug. And because of the stigma associated with some of the people that were working this case, I'm talking about the Nazca Mummies, I'm trying to report on it by talking to scientists who have researched the bodies personally. And that's the way I'm trying to go about it, because I know there's a lot of stigma, and there's a lot of lack of credibility, you could say. What do you think about this case? Have you even looked at it more profoundly at all?
A little bit, yeah. I think, with any, I think it was Valet actually who said years ago, so there's nothing inherently unscientific about any aspect of the UFO phenomenon. Nothing. It's scientific or unscientific depending on how you approach it. So if you approach it in a scientific manner, you're good. And I think with these Nazca Mummies, as they're called, the right thing to do is to subject them to as much detailed analysis as possible and just see where it leads. It's as simple as that. There's always a speculation that, you're looking at something that's a hoax. Well, sure, but someone's got to look into it. And so I think it's entirely appropriate to bring the tools of science to study these things. I don't know where they're at with that right now. I've heard different things. I hear conflicting things about it all the time. I hear people saying they've been proven to be a fake, and I have other people who've said to me, no, 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 it's still legitimate, it's still a legit mystery. So I'm waiting, and it's as simple as that. But I think certainly I would never condemn or criticize anyone for trying to do a genuine scientific analysis of any aspect. In terms of physical evidence, there have been alleged physical evidences that have existed. I don't know what has happened to the alleged implants removed by the late Dr. Roger Lear from people. That's physical evidence. And I mean, I've talked, when he was alive, I talked to Roger about it. And according to him, these objects that were removed from all these different people were remarkably consistent, were remarkably sophisticated, and seemed to produce an RF radio frequency signature. Well, that's all interesting. I don't know where those pieces are now, who's got them, and is there any more work being done on them? There's the so-called metamaterial that that Art Bell had gotten sent to, that he gave to Linda Moulton Howe, that she shopped around, including to people like Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis, who apparently did a detailed microscopic study of it. Puthoff talked about that piece a number of years ago at the Society of Scientific Exploration, and he said it's pretty damned interesting, and we don't know how it was manufactured. The sophistication is very high, and we think it has the ability to be a waveguide for high-frequency electromagnetic radiation terahertz range. It's like, holy shit, what does that mean? Well, apparently it has an anti-gravitic effect, is what he meant. Now that's now in the possession of the U.S. Army in the project known as the Karada Project. Where the hell is that? Why are we not able to see that? There are some objects that apparently are physical and are of interest, and they all end up disappearing from our study. So there's that.
That's what I meant when I said no physical evidence, that it's always hidden or they take it away.
Exactly.
And Chris Bledsoe's book, these objects throw something out that is like a liquid or something. And Bledsoe specifically says that someone took those from him and he never knew about them anymore. That's what happens. So that's why I'm saying it's not that there isn't. There's a lot.
60 years ago now was the famous landing of a craft at Socorro, New Mexico, witnessed by policeman Lonnie Zamora. One of the things people may not remember about that is the object landed, and then when it took off, it actually scorched the ground and some of the rocks that were there. Those rocks were collected. And this was written about by a researcher named Ray Stanford. And they went to facility in Maryland, I think the Goddard, what the hell was the name of it? Something facility in Maryland, where they were just, the rocks were just scraped clean. Scraped clean. They were taking evidence back in the 1960s of any kind of physical evidence that was there was just being collected and absconded with. So this is an old story, an old game.
Yeah. I got the last question that is coming from a friend. Her name is Ali. She has a podcast called Living Life Consciously. She wanted me to ask you this. What is your greatest hope for the future of humanity?
That's a great question. Well, my greatest hope is that we actually don't have a meltdown of our infrastructure and go into a kind of World War III. That's my greatest hope, that we survive. If I were to go beyond that, my greatest hope is that we can find a way to live peacefully with each other. intelligently, that we I don't know. I mean, that caught me off guard. It's such a simple question. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ali, for asking it. There are days when I just feel so black-pilled that I just don't really know how much hope I have for the future. That's my honest take on it. And I'm not saying that I think it's all gloom and doom all the time, but we're going through a transition as a species. I'm quite convinced of this. Sometimes I've called it the fourth stage of humanity. We've gone from social organization revolved around hunting and gathering for literally millions of years, 2 million years, to one in which we then learned to plant crops and domesticate animals, agriculture, basically. That basically gave us civilization. It gave us writing. It gave us the Roman Empire. It gave us all these other things. And then we go to phase 3, which is we discovered science and industry. So high level manipulation of our world that gave us power, like great, great power over nature. Gave us essentially almost the power of gods. And now we're going into a fourth stage, which is a continuation of the third stage. It's a stage of digital information, digital control, digital surveillance, kind of micromanagement of human society, and massive amounts of data management, which will include strong AI, nanotech, nanobots, quantum computing. Like it seems magical, but it's all happening. And I think that's going to create a corresponding transformation of human psychology in which people are used to not having privacy anymore, and in which potentially there's going to be very great centralized control over people. I think that's very, very likely. So it's going to transform potentially the human species, unless we have a meltdown and we have a reset.
Yeah.
But even if we have a reset, I still think the remnant of what remains is probably going to be highly digitally controlled. I don't know. So I guess my point is that we are going through, I don't know if I call it a hope. It's what I see happening. We're going through this, we're being squeezed through a filter, and out of the other side of it, I think something very different is going to be dominant. It might take a century or a couple of centuries, but it will result in a radically different society and potentially species. I think we're going through a kind of not all of that evolution will be self-directed. Some of it will be, and some of it will just be natural selection based on the new society we've created. So it's going to be very different. It's like asking someone who's a Neanderthal, what's your best hope? Like 40,000 years ago when they're basically being merged into Homo sapiens or being exterminated. What's your best hope? Hell, they're going to be like, well, I think we're going to go through a transformation. And that would be about the most accurate thing you could say. And I
Yeah.
think we're going through a radical transformation. I think ultimately we're turning ourselves into these other beings. We're going to become like them. I think for better or for worse. I think that's probably what's happening, because it's not about humanity. It's about the nature of intelligence. And we, like them, we're actually brothers. We're brothers and sisters to them. We, like them, have the ability of abstract rational thought, which is not something that other animals on our planet have, but we do. We have the ability to manipulate our environment based on our abstract types of thinking. That's something they have. And I think that what naturally happens is that it is this intelligence that is driving the evolution, not anything else. And so we're probably on a similar path to what they're already on.
So they're
And
in
I think that's what's
control.
going to happen.
Okay. Oh man, thank you. I could talk to you for hours, man. Okay, so I want you to tell the viewers, if you can, what do you got going on right now that you can share? Where can people find you? All
Absolutely.
that.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, I mentioned I'm in the home stretch of about to publish 3 volumes of USO history. It's been an amazing project. I've worked on it for almost 3 years now, and I didn't expect it to go down the kind of path that it's gone. I'm really happy with it. Each book I'm expecting to be about 400 pages, so roughly. First one I think will come out soon. Soon. We've worked on the cover. The cover looks great. I have to index it, so I'm happy with it. I think it will be out soon. I don't think it will be out before Christmas, but whatever, it's fine. So that's the big project I've got. I have a website. I would encourage people to go check out. It's called richarddolanmembers.com. There's a lot of free stuff on the website. It's not all behind a paywall. You can go see a lot of things that I put up there. And then there's a paywall. I have members, a very active community of really, really cool people who we have an active forum that's moderated, that's off limits to the world. And people also write all kinds of comments to the things that I put up, and I communicate with them that way as well. So we have a nice group. That's richarddolanmembers.com. And then I have a YouTube channel just called Richard Dolan Intelligent Disclosure. I put up my videos. I feel like I could be more active on YouTube than I am, but I put up what I do. I put up videos when I can, and I'm happy with all of that.
I think you're pretty active though. I love watching your videos. So yeah,
Thanks.
I'm gonna leave everything in the description so people can check it out. I
And I'll have a link. I'm gonna have a link to the PDF of the
yeah,
Zodiac article.
yeah, that'd be really, really cool for people. I want to thank you for your time, Mr. Dolan. I hope we can talk about other stuff in the future. I want to touch on many hypotheses of all of this when we get around two. But for now, I'm gonna have to leave you, and I want to thank you and thank you to everyone watching this show. You know what to do: like, comment, subscribe to both of our channels. And yeah, thank you, sir. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Yeah, thank you, Pavel. It was a real pleasure. I've been aware of your channel for a while. I've checked out some of your podcasts, and they're great. And when you reached out, I was like, so I would love to be on this. So I'm very happy to be a guest on your program.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. I'm kind of flustered now. Okay, so thank you, sir, and see you later, people. Have a good one.
Thank you.